Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're going to start in 5 minutes just to give people some time to attend. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be talking about FATOORA implementation in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the QR code format and structure workshop. As you're all aware that this coming 4th of December, we're going to be launching the invoicing first phase, which we call the generation phase. And one of the main requirements is the QR code in the B2C or the simplified invoices. Now, we've noticed from the communication with our taxpayers and service providers that there's some challenges in regarding the implementation of the QR code. So that's why we dedicated this workshop just to give you more insights and more details, step by step, how to create such QR codes. So in today's agenda is that we're going to have an overview of look about Sdk's QR code specifications, and then we're going to look at the TLV and what does it mean and how it can be constructed, and then we're going to look at step-by-step way of how we create the TLV QR code, plus some of the common mistakes that we have noticed the market has been implementing, and then we're going to see how we can reverse the QR code results using the decoding of the TLV QR code, and then we're going to have some code snippets from some of the famous programming languages and how it can be implemented with a few lines of code. And then finally, we're going to have some QR code examples with some of the most common mistakes and how we can avoid them. So moving on, as you know, as we mentioned earlier, that it is mandatory right now, as of the 4th of December of this year, to have a QR code in the B2C invoices. And now, of course, the QR code has to be encoded in base 64 format and has to be up to 500 characters. It cannot be more than that. Now, this has been communicated earlier this year in May when we launched the specifications of the e-invoicing. We've noticed that some of the taxpayers or some of the service providers are not doing actually the base 64 encoding. So whenever they are generating the QR code is actually readable once it is scanned, which is incorrect. It should not be readable by human. It should show some characters in base 64, and then once you decode it, you'll be able to get the results. And it is also mentioned in the specification that we are following the TLV, or which is the tag length value format. We're going to have a look right now on how it can be constructed. So, as you know, we have the invoicing split into two phases. The first phase is going to be the generation phase, which is on 4th of December. It is mandatory in the QR code to have the top 5 fields. We're talking about the seller name, the VAT registration number of the seller, the timestamp of the invoice, the date and time format, and then the invoice total with the VAT, and then the VAT amount alone. Now, later on, since starting from 2023, which is the integration phase, we're going to add some extra field, but we're going to talk about that later. Inshallah. Now, when it comes to the TLV, you have to make sure that the tags are numbered correctly in the sequence shown here. So the seller name will have the tag value of 1, the VAT registration number will have the tag value of 2, timestamp 3, the invoice total 4, and then finally the VAT total as 5. Of course, you can go to our website and see the specification and the standards through the published specification document. So what is the TLV? So basically, the TLV is the tag length value. T stands for the tag, L stands for the length, and then the value. So how it's constructed? So the message at the beginning has to contain 1 byte, which is the tag. So when we mentioned previously that the seller name has to be in the first tag, then the value will be 1. Then after that, another byte which will indicate the length of the value or the subsequent field that's going to be in the TLV string. So this is how it should be constructed. You will have the tag, which is the index of the field, and then you're going to have the value of the value of the length, and then you're going to have the actual value. Now, it's very important to fix the sizes of the tag and the length, 1 byte and 1 byte, and then this will be, of course, variable based on the length that you have passed in the previous field. So if we take an example of one of the invoices, so let's assume that we have this data that we want to convert into a QR code value. So if we assume that this is the seller name, this is the VAT registration number, timestamp, invoice total, and then the VAT total. So in the TLV, a tag will contain, for the seller name, it will be the first tag. So you will have the value 01, as you can see here. The next value will be 02 for the second field, 03, 04, and then 05. Moving on to the next byte, it's going to contain the length of the actual characters that are going to be passed in the value field. So for this Bob's record, you're going to have 12 characters, of course, including the space in between. So, of course, it has to be converted into hexadecimal. So if you count the characters here, you'll find that the value is 12. Now, when we say 12, this is the characters number 3 and 4, which is the 0C. This is in correspondence to the length. So 0C is 12, as you can see. 0F is the 15th. 14 is the 20 length, and then 7, 07, and then 06. So characters 1 and 2 are for the tag index. Characters 3 and 4 are for the length, and then the rest are the actual value that you want to store. So if you convert Bob's record into hexadecimal, you will get this amount of characters. And this is, of course, applies to the rest of the values. Now, if we concatenate them all together, make sure, first of all, that there is no separation between the tags. They have to be immediately concatenated with no separator or space. So in the previous example, we had 01 for the seller name. We have 0C, which is the length of the seller name, and then the hexadecimal representation of the seller name, followed with 020F, which is the index of the second value, and then the length of the second value, and then the value itself converted to hexadecimal, and so on and so forth. So this is how the hexadecimal representation. But this is not enough. What you need to do is, as a final step, is to convert it into base 64. Once you convert it into base 64, this is how the string will look like. And from this string, you're going to generate the QR code. And that QR code, once you scan it, you should get this string, exactly this string. You shouldn't be getting the actual values that it's presented in the invoice itself. Now, here are some of the common mistakes that we have noticed is that the tag and length, as we mentioned, they are binary values and they have to be exactly 1 byte. They cannot be more than that. Also, you have to make sure that when you convert the length, you have to make sure that you convert it from integer value, not from string. So if you convert 15, for example, if you have the value 15 in the first tag, let's say, for example, if it is converted to string, it would look at something different. So you have to convert it from integer, not from string. So the 21 representation of the integer 21 is actually 15 in hexadecimal. Another common mistake is that the value must also be converted to binary before adding to the byte array. Therefore, when adding a value like Bob's basement record to the array, it should be represented as the following in hex. And when you want to convert an Arabic one, it would look like something like this. And again, as we mentioned earlier, there should be no padding or separations between the TLV sets. So make sure that you don't have any spaces or any separator values between the hexadecimal representation. Now, if you want to encode the Arabic text into binary, it is important to use UTF-8 encoding. And using any other way will show non-readable results. So make sure that you're using the UTF encoding. Now, let's have a look at the reverse of that and how you can decode a base 64 QR code and shows the results. So basically, in the previous example, we've shown that this is how the QR code representation would look like in base 64. What you need to do is to decode this into hexadecimal representation. We have, some of the common tools, which is Scripty. It will show you this value in hexadecimal, and then you need to have a TLV reader, for example, like this one, that will convert this into a more readable format. And then finally, you can do the UTF encoding using any other tool like online UTF tools. So this is the sequence of reverse decoding the TLV, the QR code into a TLV value. This is an example of how it can look like. Now here are some code snippets of some of the most common development languages. I'm not going to through them details. I'm going to pause a bit here for you to capture the code that's been presented to you. So this is, for example, this is Node.js. This is how it looks like. This is how you do it. This one function will get you the TLV for any value. So you'll pass it the tag number and then the tag value. It will do all the necessary functions to convert it into a readable value. This is in pseudo format. How would you do it? I'm going to pause a bit here just for you to read it. And this is the next step in Node.js as well. These are the final steps that you need to do, which finally ends with coding it into or encoding it into base64 encoding. Another example that we have is Dart. This is how we do it in Dart. So the same lines of code are going to be repeated for each of the values that you have, or the TLVs. And then finally, what you need to do is concatenate them and then encode them into base64. Just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please post them in the FAQ panel. We're going to try our best to answer them through this workshop. However, if you aren't able to answer them through this workshop, we're going to keep updating our FAQs to make sure that we're answering the most common questions. Moving forward, these are some of the examples that we found in the market, how they are doing the QR code. So all the red ones are invalid way of doing it. The green one is the valid way to do it. So for example, we noticed that some of the taxpayers are presenting the QR code that which have a hyperlink to a website. This is the incorrect way of doing it. Another one is actually generating the actual text representation of the invoice. Again, this is not the way that you have to do it. You have to convert it into TLV and then encode it into hexadecimal and then base64. So these are all wrong examples of doing the QR code. Next is we actually have some of the taxpayers are actually linking the e-invoice in a PDF format. So they store the invoice in a PDF format and they have the link of that invoice in the QR code itself. Another one is we have some numbers, some random characters presented in the QR code. This is not how we should do it. As we mentioned, this is how we should have it once you scan through any regular camera. Now, what we're doing right now is that we're publishing or we're updating our VAT mobile app on the Apple and Google Store. What you will have is our Zatka mobile app. You will have the ability to scan the QR code generated from the string, and it will show you the actual results. Again, just as a reminder, previously we have launched the Sdk Validation, which is related to the QR code and the moving forward the integration phase validation as well. So if you go to this link, you'll be able to download the SDK, and through the SDK, you'll be able to validate the QR code strings that you have generated through your system. So probably the most important command that we have in the SDK is this one, FATOORA validate QR-QR, and then you're going to pass the string of the QR code that you have generated, which is this one. You pass it through the command line, and it will show you the results of the text of the e-invoice. If it didn't show you and show you an error, then it means that you have an issue with constructing the QR code. Of course, the SDK is also accompanied by a user manual where you can find a step-by-step guide on how to use the SDK.